Oh, it's okay. In the meantime, I will tell you who is Gampopa. Who doesn't know who is Gampopa? Okay, good. So I will tell you in the meantime who is Gampopa. Gampopa was born, I think, in 1079 in central Tibet. And he trained as a doctor, as a traditional doctor, in Tibetan, Chinese, and apparently also Ayurvedic medicines. He was well known as a physician, and he was married. Then his wife died in childbirth, so both his wife and the child died. And before she died, she asked him, please don't marry again, please become a monk. So you could do that in Tibet, yeah. And so then he did so, and he became a monk belonging to the tradition of Atisha, which was called the Kadampa. And he received at that time of ordination the name Sonam Rinchen, which means like jewel of merit. And so then he studied in the Kadampa tradition, became quite learned, but he felt that nonetheless something was lacking. And then he heard that there was this great yogi living in southern Tibet called Milarepa. And so then he journeyed to find Milarepa, who meantime had told his own students that someone very special was coming and to welcome him. And so then when Gampopa got near, the students of Milarepa went to meet him and said, oh, Milarepa is really excited to meet you. He's really very anxious. And so Gampopa got a little proud. Oh, really, I'm really quite special. Look, Milarepa wants to meet me. And as a result, Milarepa wouldn't see him for about a month. And he had to wait. But eventually, his pride somewhat lessened. They did meet. And of course, Milarepa had known that this was going to be his heart son, who would carry on the lineage. I mean, Milarepa had many great disciples, of whom Jetsunma had lived with Milarepa since he was 12 years old and was an incredible yogi, but still the lineage didn't pass through Jetsunma. The lineage passed through Gampopa because he had all the causes and conditions. He was very learned, and also he was a monk, and so therefore in time he also established monasteries, and the lineage went through him. It's called, because he's called Gampopa, although his name was Sonam Rinchen, because he lived near a place called Gampo. And also he lived near a place called Dakpo. And so sometimes he's called Dakpo Laje, meaning the doctor from Dakpo. And the lineage which passed through him is called the Dakpo Kagyu. So anyway, he stayed not very long with Milarepa, compared with many of other Milarepa students. He only stayed a few months with him. But Milarepa gave him the whole transmission, especially of the 6 Dharmas or yogas of Naropa and the Mahamudra tradition. And then he went away and he practiced for a long time in solitude, and till he gained the ultimate realizations, and then he began to teach. So he died when he was 74, which is fairly old for a Tibetan in those days. And he had many very great disciples, but the main ones were Dusun Khenpa, who was the first Karmapa, and Pamodrupa, from whom came the other main Kagyu schools, the Drigogna Drukpa and the Tom. So therefore, Gampopa was, the thing was that after Gampopa, it wasn't just a yogic lineage. The yogic lineages tended to, because they were not controlled, therefore they tended to peter out after a while. Whereas the ones which were established within the monasteries, then it had a structure. And people wrote texts, and those texts got printed. So in that way, the lineages, those lineages carried on. So we see it in the lineage tree. For example, I myself am Drukpa Kagyu, and before Gampopa, after Milarepa, there were two yoginis, two female practitioners in the lineage. But after Gampopa, no more women in the lineage. That was it. It was all, after that, the head lamas of all the various monasteries, they interchanged and kept the lineage going within themselves, just a very few. And so the yogic side of it was there, but they were not the main carriers of the lineage after it became a monastic institution. Which is nothing against Gampopa. I mean, as a result of his efforts, the Kagyu lineage exists up until the present day. If it had been left to Jetsunma, I think we would not even know about it, maybe not even know about Milarepa. Because Milarepa's stories were written quite a long time later. Anyway, so that was Gampopa. He was a great, very important part of the Kagyu lineage because he standardized. And because he had been a monk trained in the Kadampa, he brought together the Kadampa philosophy, the Lamrim philosophy, along with the yogic practices which he got from Milarepa. So the two come together, and that is the Kagyu lineage. Gampopa in the West is mostly known for a book which is usually translated as Dual Ornament and Liberation. So he's mostly known for that. That was one of the first books which was translated into English, which gave the Lamrim, the path and the stages on the path, which is so important in the Tibetan tradition. And so that book was one of the first of the Lamrim texts, and it had been translated early on by someone called Herbert Gunther. So even when I first started, which was way back in the early 60s, that book was available. There were not many books in those days on Tibetan Buddhism, which were genuine, valid, not like Lobsang Rampa's Third Eye. And one of the valid texts was this text by Gampopa. Okay, so this is a very, very short text. Of course, it's only 4 lines. But those 4 lines include the whole path. You know, they're sort of like, computer program. It's a very small, and then you push the button, then it all opens up into a whole program. So it's like that. It's just little reminders, each line for the next level on the path. So for that reason, even though it's very, very short, it has been very seminal in a way of transmitting the Dharma. Because if you remember each part, then the whole program is actually there. So, do we have a clock? You said something about a clock. I mean, otherwise we're going forever, and then you'll be sorry. Here we go. Yes. Okay, right. Okay, so I would just, in the Tibetan tradition, the other thing in the Tibetan tradition, this is only 4 lines, so you're lucky. We are not supposed to read or study a text until we have received what is called the lung, which means like the oral transmission. So traditionally in Tibet, or even today, you would not pick up a book and just start reading it, a Dharma book. We have to find someone who has themselves received that reading, and they will read it to you. and then you have the permission to read it yourself. So this reading goes back, the person who is giving you the reading themselves received the reading, who themselves received the reading, all the way back to the original author. So even with a small thing like this, the lung would go all the way back to Gampopa himself, because nobody would ever study a text unless they had been given the permission through reading. Of course, the Tibetans, because of this, and usually books are this thick, read incredibly fast. They're really experts at fast reading. But even so, often if you have a big text, it will take, several days to get through it, unless you're reading all day. Mei Ling, she asked one of our yogis at Tashijong for the lung, the transmission, for a Mahamudra text by one of the previous Kampa Rinpoches. And so he said, oh yes, okay. And he thought it was this 3-page one, but she had, in fact, intended a 400-page one. So when he got there and we presented him with the text, he kind of swallowed, and then he said, okay. And so he did. I mean, every day he would come once or twice and, spend a couple of hours reading through the text. And because he's not a lama, he's just a yogi, he's not so fast at reading as, a trained tuku would be. But still, he got through it all, in a few days. So yes, so this is only 4 lines, so you're lucky, okay? So I'll just repeat it in the Tibetan and then we'll go on. Okay. Lo chu sado chinche lo tu so, chu lam tu do chinche lo tu so. Lang cho pa se lo chinche lo tu so. Tu ba yeshi su cha lo chinche lo tu so. So, the first one, I hope it tells you. No, it doesn't. Okay, so it says, so it means, Chinjilo means give blessings. Chinlo is, it literally has the idea of a wave of something. So some people translate it as grace waves. There's a lot of words which don't really have a Western or an English translation, and sometimes it has a kind of a different feeling in English that it would have in the original language. This is natural, because each language in any country has its own context in which that word comes. This is why there are many, many translations of this very small text, because there's no actual equivalent that everybody can agree on. And so everybody tries to find something, but it's not necessarily, everybody agrees that that's the perfect translation. Occasionally we come across words where everybody agrees, yes, that's about the closest you're going to get. And so everybody uses that. But otherwise, so many Dharma terms, every translator struggles to improve on it and get closer to what the feeling context is in the original. And so this is also for myself one reason why I need to have the Tibetan, because sometimes I read translations and think, what's that in Tibetan? Because in English it could mean anything, and you wonder, well, you can't get the real feeling for it unless you look at the original. Now, of course, it's the same. If you can imagine, Shakespeare in Tibetan, I mean, what? I mean, it's very difficult, actually. Translators do an incredible job, because it's not so easy. It's not this word means this word means that. It's because, there often is no exact equivalent. I mean, sometimes I think, I'm just saying this because there are many different translations of this, just these 4 lines. The word has a meaning there. That's the basic meaning. but then it has all the contexts that go with it. And so then you try to find the equivalent, and even if you can find the equivalent, the likelihood that they're going to go like that is very unlikely. Maybe they'll go like this. Do you understand? So the feeling tone of a word might be very different in different languages. And so this is always a big problem for translators to have to deal with. So as a result, there are many different, I looked up at least 6 different translations just for these 4 lines that I could Google. And, everyone was different. They all more or less mean the same thing, but sometimes they really interpret more than translate. So the translation which I chose is the one which goes closer to the Tibetan. So the first one is Lo Chusudor Chinchilaptusol. So Chusol means please do. I pray you to do this, right? So here it is using it as grant. Grant your blessings that my mind, Lo, Chusu, towards the Dharma, Droa, goes, right? So that's very simple. Grant your blessings that my mind may go towards the Dharma. Some people say, be one with the Dharma. Others say, may follow the Dharma. But anyway, it literally means, grant your blessings that my mind may go towards the Dharma. So the important thing here, what does that mean? It means that we cannot follow the Dharma unless the mind is interested to do so. Because we can outwardly, not in the West that would not happen, but in Asia, where you're in a Buddhist culture, it's quite easy to, as in Christianity in the West, you go to church on Sundays and, on Christmas Day. But the rest of the day, the rest of the week, the rest of the year, how Christian are we? Right? And the same in Buddhist countries, you go to the temples, you make offerings, and so forth. But actually, how much our mind is in tune with the Dharma? Probably not that much. We know basic things. You have to be good, you have to be kind, you have to be honest. But there's no real interest in the Dharma. So the first thing is how to make the mind go towards the Dharma. So that the Dharma is not something that we do on high days and holidays, but holy days, right? Holiday means holy days. But is something which is at the center of our life instead of just the periphery when we have a bit of time. So the first part is setting the foundation. Some commentaries say that the first step is a disenchantment with samsara. That means that we recognize that all the joys that we might hope that samsara, anybody not know what samsara is? Everybody knows samsara. Okay, samsara means the endless round of birth and death and rebirth and re-death, the ordinary worldly life that we live. We are told by society that if we make lots of money and we get a nice big house and fancy cars and designer clothes, that somehow that's going to make us feel really fulfilled. And people who have acquired all these have discovered it doesn't leave them fulfilled. They are asking themselves, is this all life is about? And so then, as with the Buddha himself, who was a prince and had everything, including a wife and a son, and a doting father, and a kingdom about to become his own, nonetheless, he recognized that was not enough. There must be something beyond this. Is this all we're here for? Just to, surround ourselves with pleasure and comfort, and then what? And so for many people also living in the West, one of the advantages is that we can see that all these perks to the worldly life do not actually give us a sense of genuine inner fulfillment and satisfaction. However much we get, there's always more, and then what? And so this sense of disenchantment is, by some of the lamas, regarded as the key to opening the door to the palace of all the treasures of the Dharma teaching. Unless we're interested and we have a reason for wanting to go further, then we're not even going to get started. So that sense of turning away, it doesn't mean you have to all give up your families and your home and go forth, but it does mean that inwardly we no longer place all our reliance on outer satisfactions, that we are looking for something deeper and more permanent. So a lot of people come to the Dharma or to spiritual paths in general because of suffering. Because outwardly everything's falling apart. And so then they ask themselves, is there a refuge? They are caught in the stormy waves. Where is a boat? The Buddha himself described the Dharma as a boat. He said that it helps us to ride the waves of samsara. Samsara's waves go up and down. Sometimes everything's okay. Sometimes we're down again because waves go up, waves go down. And so what we need is something to help us to ride the waves. And so the Dharma is also compared to a boat. So, therefore, let's see what they're saying here. Okay, so we are disenchanted, right? So how to make us disenchanted, in case you're not disenchanted? And you think, well, yeah, there are problems, but life's okay, really. How to recognize, even while you're not renouncing everything, nonetheless, that we recognize how important it is to have this inner stability within us that we can carry everywhere with us. Like a boat. That boats go up and down, but nonetheless, you're not submerged in the waves. So traditionally, the way to do that, to arouse a sense of disillusion with the hopes that worldly life is going to bring us genuine happiness. Not the genuine happiness is something which comes from inside and is not dependent on external circumstances. To think that all our happiness depends on other people or on our possessions or on situations going exactly the way we want them to go is a cause of, it's very precarious. Because things don't go the way I want them to go. Things go the way they're going to go. And if we depend always on external factors, other people and situations, for our sense of satisfaction, we are endlessly going to be disappointed. Whereas if we recognize that genuine well-being and genuine happiness is an inner condition dependent on having a well-trained mind, and that the problem is not out there, the problem is in here, then we get the first inkling of recognizing maybe there is a different way to live our lives. That doesn't, as I mean renouncing everything, but it means inwardly there is a turning towards the Dharma. So that's why he said that, bless me, that my mind may go towards the Dharma. It's not enough that we recite prayers or that we go to the temples and make offerings, as in Asia they do. The mind has to go towards the Dharma. And going towards the Dharma means that we really are interested in taming and training the mind, recognizing that that is the source of our genuine happiness. So, therefore, in order to encourage us towards that, there are, first of all, the sense of how privileged we are to have a human body. I mean, you know, we think with all the billions of people on this planet that having a human body is no big deal. And especially when we live in big cities, then again, we're dealing with all these crowds, so what's precious about having a human body? And of course, all human bodies are not equally precious. When they say precious human body, they mean a body as a human which has certain endowments. Now, they have a whole form of what these endowments are, but in general, what it means is that we, first of all, have the freedom to think and act more or less how we wish to. In other words, if we want to study Dharma, we can do that. No one's stopping us. We have the freedom. And in the West, especially, we have the education. I mean, all of you can pick up a Dharma book and, you know, maybe not Madhyamaka, but in general, we can open the book and we can read it and understand it. And even Madhyamaka, if we sit and think, we can understand it. Because why? Because we are educated. I mean, I don't know if you recognize how rare that is in the world, and especially for women. I mean, most people can't, many women in the world, even today, cannot read in their own language. And even if they can read the words, doesn't mean they understand the meaning. There are no, even today, I mean, among Tibetans, unless you're, you know, really been highly educated and become a geshe or a khenpo, most Tibetans would not just pick up a book and just start reading, curl up with it. You know, you have to have it taught you, word by word. This word means that, this word means that, this word means that. Put it together, what it means is. That's how they study. Even today with our nuns who now have been studying, you know, nearly 20 years, some of them, still that's how they do it. And so the ease of being able to understand the Dharma comes because of the education that you have received. So that is rare in this world. Even today it's rare. What to speak of when this was written. And the other point is that you have the freedom to believe what you want. You know, you're living in a country where, you know, basically whatever you path you want to follow, providing it doesn't harm others, you're free to do it. Or not do it, as you wish. And especially for a precious human body, to have an interest in spiritual things. Because that is very, very rare. I mean, even in Buddhist countries, I mean, the majority of the people, they have faith in the Dharma, but they don't really know what they have faith in. And it's only because culturally that's what you do. They haven't really thought it through. I mean, they still have devotion, which is wonderful. But many of them don't really know what they're having devotion towards, if you ask them. So to have a human body where you have the education and the abilities, plus the freedom to practice and study what you wish to practice and study, plus the interest to do so, is still very rare. It's very rare. And so if one has all these causes and conditions coming together, then one should not waste the opportunity. That's the point. Not think, well, I'll later, when I have time, when I retire, when the kids grow up. Why not? Because there is impermanence and death. Today we're here. Tomorrow, who knows? We don't know. The Buddha said the one thing sure about life is death. But death is certain, time of death is uncertain. We don't know. It's not even a matter of age. Babies die, children die, young people die, adolescents, middle-aged, old. We don't know. But for sure we're going to die. And then what? What happens next depends on what we're doing now. Everything is impermanent. Everything is changing. When something happens, we think it's going to go on forever, but it doesn't go on forever. It changes. So while we have the opportunity to study and practice and integrate the Dharma into our daily lives, whatever our daily lives might be, we shouldn't waste that opportunity. This is very, very important, and this is why it comes first. Because if we keep putting things off thinking, oh, later, when things get easier, when things get smoother, then I'll practice, then I'll do it, yes. But we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. What's going to happen later today? We don't know. So while there is this window of opportunity, we shouldn't waste it. Because what we are doing now will determine the future. Moment to moment, we're eating up the past, but we are creating our future. So right now is the only time we have. It doesn't mean when it says about renouncing that you have to leave your home, but it does mean that we have to renounce our ordinary ways of thinking and really bring the Dharma into our everyday life. Everything that we do should be permeated by our Dharma appreciation. So the rest of the text is about how to do that. But it's very important. The first thing is to recognize that we have this very privileged birth on account of causes and conditions which we ourselves have created. It's not just arbitrary from a Buddhist point of view. We ourselves have created these opportunities through causes and conditions. If we waste that, it is very unlikely that such auspicious connections will come about again. Now it's all these causes and conditions that come together, but if we don't make use of it, then they will fall apart, and in the future, who knows? So this is why it's very important not to postpone. Why do we postpone? Well, it says we're lazy. We're lazy and we make excuses. I mean, first of all, there's laziness, right? Yes, you should all get up in the morning and do an hour's meditation before breakfast, but it was a late night last night and I've got a lot of things to do tomorrow and, I really need to sleep in. And so that kind of laziness is very obvious. It's not necessarily easy to overcome, but it is, we all know, we understand as being lazy. That we put off doing what we need to do because, we just procrastinate. The second form of laziness is essentially low self-esteem and discouraging ourselves. We tell ourselves, I can't do it. Other people can meditate. I always try to meditate. Too many thoughts. Oh, my mind is so busy. I can't do it. Everybody else is in samadhi. Look how beautifully they're sitting. Me, oh, no. It's hopeless. And so we discourage ourselves. And somehow we feel that's virtuous. We're making a genuine assessment of our abilities and they're pretty low, so I won't even try. And so this is not regarded as being virtuous, it's regarded as being lazy. Because we all have Buddha nature. And so therefore, everybody, when they first sit down to practice, maybe for years, has problems. If you actually talk to meditators, you see they all have problems. And the ones who carry on are the ones who finally get there. I mean, it's like with any skill. If you want to learn a sport, if you want to learn a musical instrument, if you want to learn anything, in the beginning we are totally incompetent, but we improve with practice. If we don't practice, we will not improve. So in the beginning, many problems. We can't hit the ball, or we can't, play the chords. But if we keep going over and over and over, eventually we learn. This is why Buddhists are always talking about practice. Not about accomplishment, it's about practice. We keep going over and over and over and over, and slowly, things improve. So to say to oneself, I cannot practice because I don't have, I'm not able, this is too difficult, is not being humble. It's being lazy. And so the third kind of laziness is being busy. We get very, very occupied. We fill up our days and often our evenings with all sorts of activities, even Dharma activities, running Dharma centers, running around, going blah, 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 blah. And our daily life, our workplace, our, taking care of the household, taking care of children, taking care of anything. We occupy our days with activities, and then we say, I have no time to practice. I'd love to practice. There's no time. That is considered laziness. Why? Well, one thing, because as Taisita Rinpoche said, people are always saying they have no time to practice, but as long as you're breathing, you can practice. And the practice is to make us into good human beings. So it's not just a matter of practice means, doing meditation retreats and so forth. That's not just, that's very useful, but it's not what they mean by practice. Practice is everyday life. There are many qualities of the heart which we need to cultivate. including, of course, kindness, generosity, patience, compassion, loving kindness, and awareness or mindfulness. Just being present, not being swept away. Not getting lost in all our mental chatter. Bringing ourselves back, even just by breathing in, breathing out. Bring ourselves back. Throughout the day. So that everyone we meet becomes our Dharma practice. If they are nice people, it's very easy. We can be friendly, we can be helpful, we can be kind, we can be generous. If they're difficult people, then even more helpful. We can cultivate patience, compassion, and all these qualities of open tolerance, as well as, of course, if they are really very difficult people, learning how to have this fearless compassion, not just being weak. I mean, compassion and patience isn't weakness, that is strength. We can, be very firm, but at the same time, we're not out of the negative emotions, but out of genuine understanding of the situation to try to prevent them from creating even further bad karma. But anyway, the point is that our daily life should be our Dharma practice. We should wake up and not postpone thinking that practice only means when I'm in a retreat situation. And that, sitting on my cushion, that's practice. And when one is out in the world, that is a wasting time. Because if we think like that, and especially in our modern context, then the mind will never change. And the whole point is we have to transform our mind. And so all these other beings, and all these other people, and all these other situations, if we can bring to it the quality of awareness, we'll deal with it later, but if we can bring that quality of awareness into our everyday life, then everything we do is a Dharma practice. There's no separation. And then we're grateful for whatever is presented to us. It's not a problem. We wake up. I mean, the whole point of the Buddhist path is to wake up. The word Buddha is from the root to wake. So we're trying to wake up from our sleep of ignorance. And for that, we need everything that happens to us. What can we learn from this? What is this teaching us? How can I respond in a way which takes my mind on to the Dharma path? Everything is the path. If we are aware, if our hearts are open, and if we take the opportunity to use everything as a teaching for us. So this is very important. Because otherwise this whole thing about laziness, I think it's very insightful. Because so much that we think lazy just means not doing something, but it could be doing too much, but without awareness, or it could mean that we tell ourselves we can't do it, so we don't. If I tell myself I can't do it, then I don't have to try. So that is also just all these excuses we give ourselves for not actually getting down to the work of transforming our mind. There's always a problem out there. a situation is not right, or other people are too difficult, they're not the kind of people I want to hang out with, or my boss doesn't understand me, or my colleagues are difficult, or something. There's always something wrong. But the beauty of it is that the problem is not out there. We cannot change the rest of the world, but we can change ourselves. And so that everybody else and all the problems and difficulties which we come across are all signposts for helping our mind to go towards the Dharma. And the Dharma is inside us. It's the light inside us, showing us the path. So, therefore, this first part is very, very important. If our mind doesn't go towards the Dharma, then everything else that we do is not going to go towards the Dharma either. And we can do 10 million retreats, and we can do 100 mundros, and we can do anything. We can take thousands of initiations, and we can meet every Lama that's ever been born. And at the end of the day, our mind hasn't changed an iota. Except now we consider ourselves great practitioners. Look at me, oh yes, I met him years ago, and I got this wrong. And, he said he could see I was special. Or if he didn't mention it, he should have done. He looked. So the point is that the only context we have to look at is our mind really transforming and going towards the Dharma? That's the question we have to ask. And even the teacher says the same thing. He says you can do a year's retreat, and at the end you come out. The question we have to ask is not, how much bliss we got or how much insight into emptiness and all this. What we have to, certainly not how many mantras we managed to accomplish. That doesn't even come into it. The question is, has anything changed? Are our negative emotions rooted in anger and greed and delusion, confusion? Has that lessened so that when things which normally would upset us arise, we don't feel upset? When things which normally we would really go for and want, we don't care about anymore. If we have it, it's nice. If we don't, who cares? And our minds are a little bit more clear, more awake. If that has happened, then it was successful. If it stayed the same, or even got more sensitive, more upset, more irritable, or more greedy, we spend our whole retreat thinking about ice cream, we're useless. Waste of time. It's not a matter about accumulating things, even experiences or, teachings. It's about transforming, changing our mind. That's the only criteria. Are we actually, something inside really changing? Dropping. It's not even about gaining, it's about losing. It's about letting go. Things which one time seemed so vital no longer matter so much. And our hearts begin to open up. And our sense of presence becomes stronger. So, we'll talk about this again more. But the point is that our heart, mind, not just our intellect, but our heart, has to go towards the Dharma. Dharma has to be at the center of our lives. Then, if it really is, everything is transformed. It's no longer worldly activity. It's Dharma practice.